Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you, and pleased to be joined now by my broadcast partner on the Bills Radio Network. It is Bills color analyst Eric Wood, also host of the Centered on Buffalo podcast, to dice up Bills Chiefs. And Eric, first things first, according to ESPN Analytics, the chances for the Chiefs to land the number one seed dropped from 72% to 53% with the loss, a nearly 20% drop. And yes, they've got a couple of cupcakes in front of them the next 2 weeks in the Panthers and the Raiders, but they have a resurgent Chargers team. They've got the Texans, who are going to need wins down the stretch based on their 6-4 record right now heading into Monday night. And then at the Steelers, at the Broncos to finish. It could get interesting.
It definitely could, and that's part of the reason we talked about in the pregame yesterday, Chris, that you don't hold anything back in this situation. It's not a matter of, do you maybe hide some scheme in case you play them again in the playoffs? Do you rest some guys that are questionable? And Amari Cooper, do you give him that extra week off this week, then give him the bye and assume that he'll be, fully ready to go by the 49ers game? In my opinion, you go out and chase that one seed, and the Bills are now a half game back for the one seed. And so, you get that bye week to start the playoffs, home field advantage throughout. It's a massive advantage. And I understand, a lot of the reasoning behind, hey, it's hard to beat a team twice, or let's not show them anything and wait for the playoffs. In my opinion, the stuff that worked yesterday becomes a setup for the next game. You don't necessarily have to hold things back. And for the most part, it seems like we came away fairly healthy. And Amari Cooper, who was questionable to play in the game, had a couple really nice catches in the game.
So you get to this point of the season, and it's starting to look right. The Bills are in the conversation now. They fought their way into the conversation with Kansas City. At least they're within shouting distance, right? Now you've got, on the other end of the spectrum, you got teams like New England and the New York Jets, 3-8. You can maybe somebody in their locker room is going to stick a fork in those guys. The Cleveland Browns, 2-8. Jacksonville, 2-9, and just got embarrassed by the Detroit Lions team. The Vegas Raiders are 2-8. The New York Giants are 2-8. Then you got 3-7. You got all these teams that soon, now you're to the point where some of the teams are like going, I'm done. They're done. So how does that mentality affect the top teams? They're going to run through some of these teams, and the league is now in that phase where we're on it, they're not. The Bills are going to run through a little roller coaster of teams that are in it and out of it. They get to the last 3 games of the season. They play the Patriots twice, the Jets once. The Chiefs end with a flurry of Pittsburgh Steelers and Baltimore Ravens. How does this affect what you do in the coming weeks now, with the buys and all that mixed in?
Yeah, I mean, you're attacking these next few games. It's the toughest part of the Bills' schedule, starting with Kansas City. Then you have the 49ers, you got the Rams and the Lions. I mean, those are all teams having a nice year this year. And when you looked at the season, or you looked at the schedule at the start of the season, this is a stretch that you identified as this is going to be really difficult. And so you got to go all in. But honestly, with Sean McDermott and his messaging, I'm sure it's going to be, we're going all in each and every week for the remainder of the season. We've got to keep getting better and better so that we get to the point where we are peaking when we get to the playoffs. And we didn't peak with a week 11 win prior to the bye against Kansas City. Sean said it after the game, this was not our Super Bowl. The season's not finished. I know that's an obvious statement, but he wants that messaging relayed early and often to his team that this team is going to stay, as he likes to say, humble and hungry the remainder of the year, and understanding that this is a year where you feel like if you don't have the best team right now, you're one of those top teams. You have as good a shot of anyone to win it all this year.
So how good do you have to be now? This is a follow-up. So Baltimore 7-4, they were humming along. Now they've started to stumble. You got these teams that are on the cusp. The South is 6-4 leader, Houston 5-6. Then you've got the Chargers now, who look different, right?
2 games back of the Chiefs.
And so do the Denver Broncos now. Which of these teams do you think that are not leading their division, like Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Houston, Kansas City, which of these AFC teams do you think, is a team that could have aspirations to maybe knock any of these teams off?
Yeah, I think the obvious one would be Baltimore, just with their style of play. If they're able to stay healthy, they're going to be a tough matchup in the playoffs. Now, their defense has been playing awful. That's part of the reason that they're sitting there with 4 losses on the season. Their offense has continued to stay consistent, even though they only put up 16 points yesterday against the Steelers. That's a team that could be as dangerous as anyone. And then the Chargers, they're playing excellent on the defense side of the football. And then Herbert and that offense looks completely different with Jim Harbaugh at the helm. I mean, talk about an identity shift in 1 year. You go from a team that, had its obvious struggles. They fired their coach mid-year last year to a team now that's sitting at 7-3, playing a big boy brand of football. Ladd McConkey looks great on the outside. Herbert's playing great football. They're running the snot out of the ball with Greg Roman as offensive coordinator, which is no surprise having played under Greg and understanding how he can scheme up runs. J.K. Dobbins looks as good as he has, comes off these injuries, these bad injuries he had while he was with Baltimore, comes out to LA, and maybe it's the warmer weather or something, but he's found a little pep in his step out there now. And so that seems to be a dangerous team as well. And then, they're not second place in their division. They're sitting now at 4-7 on the season, but that Cincinnati Bengals offense, if they could find a defense, that Cincinnati Bengals offense is not someone that anybody's looking to sign up to play against in the playoffs.
Right. Third down, fourth straight week, the Bills convert more than 50%. They're actually at 60% yesterday. And the amazing thing was 8 third and 8s or more of the 15. More than half are long down and distance against a defense the caliber of the Chiefs, and yet they still convert. That's a dangerous place to live, and yet they still converted. So as encouraged as you are by the conversion percentage, Eric, I think we were talking about this in the second half, about how much they probably went a little too far in running on first down, almost to their detriment.
Yeah, it seemed to get fairly predictable, and we talked about in the pregame, Chris, you wanted to stay disciplined in that game, understanding that this is a great rush defense, and in order to take advantage of the pass defense, you were likely going to have to at least give them the threat of run, especially on early downs when it's not an obvious pass situation. So I felt like the Bills did a good job of that and keeping them honest. They maybe just went a little too far with it, but when you look at the way the game worked out, it's hard to second guess those decisions. This is a interior of the Chiefs defense with Chris Jones and Wharton, the nose guard. Those guys are hard to move. They got fast downhill linebackers. Their defensive ends can play the run as well with Karlaftis and Dana on the early downs. And so they didn't have that early down success. Give them credit for executing, but that's not on third and longs, but that's not a world you want to live in. Over the past 3 games, I believe the Bills are second in the NFL in converting third downs. And, on the season, while the Bills still aren't, up in that top 5 and third down percentage like they usually live in, they're also the best team in the NFL on fourth down this season. So when you look at those downs combined, it actually moves them up in the top 10, which is a world that the Bills have generally always lived in with Josh Allen, just understanding that there's 2 or 3 first downs a game where it was a third and long and Josh takes it with his legs.
So we got this bye coming up, and Brownie, I agree. I am so ready for a bye week for this team, particularly after the game they played last night. But okay, so you got 2 weeks, and you got a chance at maybe Matt Milano getting healthy, Keon Coleman getting healthy, Spencer Brown back on the field, Cooper getting healthy, Kincaid back on the field. You got a chance to line up with the guys you actually thought you might have at the beginning of the season. Is it ever that simple?
Probably not. And we'll
Right.
see how these injuries shake out over this next week or so. We probably won't get any injury designations and whatnot until Bills get back from getting, I believe Sean's going to give them maybe 6 days off or whatever that is. And then, when they start practice, I'm sure they'll practice an extra day in preparation for the 49ers Sunday night football game. So maybe that Monday of the bye week or following the bye week, we'll get some injury designations. But, although the Bills got hit pretty hard by the injury bug throughout this season, most of the injuries, if not all of them, especially to the key guys, have not been season enders. And so you get these guys back. It's exciting to see Matt Milano out there. And I know all the guys talked about it all week last week and how great it was to see him out there. But it was great to see him out there and look healthy. His knee, from the limited I got to see him, he seems to be moving very fluidly out there. It'll be exciting to see him and Bernard out there at the same time. Dorian Williams has played at a high level. Is there times where maybe you bring all three of those guys on the field at the same time? We'll see how that all shakes out, but you're starting to get really healthy as a football team to where, this receiving core should look like we thought it was going to look when the season started, plus an Amari Cooper, and then this defense that we're all excited about, but there was a lot of new faces on that defense side of the ball. They've played well, and now they get an all-pro player back at middle linebacker. It's exciting. And then, I'll say this about the defense real quick. One of my biggest critiques in when we've played Kansas City in the past is, especially in the postseason, the defensive line with a four-man rush was not able to get home. Well, yesterday, the defensive line created constant pressure on Mahomes. And then also when they went to their dime package, they would take a defensive tackle off the field, leave Dorian Williams on there. And so they had four guys at the line of scrimmage, one of them being Dorian Williams, where they have some extra speed up there, and they wouldn't always bring him. I mean, they got a sack last night off of a three-man rush. That's tough to do in the NFL. And it was Greg Rousseau creating the penetration, and then here comes Von Miller for the sack. And so I was extremely encouraged by that. That gives me some extra confidence heading into a potential second matchup in the postseason against them that we're going to be able to affect him.
Let's just talk about the O-line a little bit here, Eric, because I know your eyes get drawn there ever so often during the course of a game, and maybe the job that Vandermark did at right tackle, filling in for Spencer Brown, and then I'll give credit to Brian Baldinger for drawing attention to the game that Osiris Torrance had, left in some one-on-one matchups with Chris Jones and did a pretty good job. I mean, there are not many teams that are going to ask an offensive lineman to single up with him and try to win, and Osiris was asked to do that and fared pretty well by the looks of it.
Yeah, the Chiefs understand that Chris Jones is going to be their best pass rusher on most situations. So they'll align their defense where Josh has got to move the point the other way. So the center, maybe left guard, and left tackle are all going to go to the left-hand side. It's going to leave those guys one-on-one over on the right-hand side. Bills didn't run the ball great yesterday at all, but their pass protection was excellent. And Josh Allen doesn't get sacked in the game, wasn't hit much at all in the game. And then those guys had to win one-on-one matchups, and give both those guys credit. We barely even noticed Ryan Vandermark, which is a great thing for an offensive lineman. You're filling in for Spencer Brown, who's had an incredible season, and he looked good last week when he came in against Indianapolis. Spencer Brown was able to come back in that game, and then getting the start yesterday in that type of environment with all the buildup, he just looked like he belonged out there. That's a great sign for Ryan Vandermark. And then when you move to Osiris Torrance and you have McGovern at center, you got David Edwards at left guard, you got a lot of size in the interior of that offensive line. You might lose a little bit of athleticism at times, not having a Mitch Morse type, but you have more size, you have more power. And we saw that come to fruition yesterday, where that pocket in front of Josh Allen, where against the Chiefs, it seemed like in the past would constantly get squeezed down on him just right in the middle. Yesterday, that pocket, for the most part, stayed towards the line of scrimmage. And a lot of that's by design on how Brandon Beat has built this offensive line and then how Cromer coaches those guys up.
What has to happen for the rest of the regular season for Josh to win the MVP?
Stay consistent. I mean, I think yesterday and last night, playing in a game that's broadcasted all around the country, to have that game go for over 300 yards of total offense himself, to score 30 points against a team who hasn't given up 28 or more, and I believe Chris said it was 38 games, to be able to do that in front of that spotlight. Okay, now at 9-2, you're likely right up there at the top of it. If he stays playing ball the way he has and the Bills keep winning, I believe Josh gets his first MVP of his career.
I'll say this, though, not for nothing. They're going to have another game in 3 weeks. If you go into Detroit and have the kind of game he had yesterday, you can hand him the trophy there in week 15 or whatever it's going to be. I think that game will say a lot about what he'll do, because that is going to team that I don't think anybody's going to – the Bills may not be favored in that game for sure. I think that game might be his last volley in getting that award.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I'll give friend of the show, Dan Orlovsky, credit on this one. And he was talking about how last year against San Francisco, Lamar had his MVP moment from that point forward. I believe he had 5 touchdowns in that game. From that point forward, essentially the writing was on the wall that Lamar was going to get the MVP. The Ravens were going to be the 1 seed in the AFC. And he said Josh was going to have one of those types of games against the Chiefs in this big time spotlight. And for the most part, he did. And you cap off that game with that run. Well, now that's all everybody's talking about today. And you'd like to say this isn't a, one moment media driven award, but we've seen it be that way, especially recently.
All right, Eric, thanks as always for the time. Enjoy the bye week. We'll catch up with you after the bye.
Sounds good, guys. Looking forward to it.